Hey there guys, and welcome back to a brand new Echo CPG video. We're now officially back from the break, and it is great to have returned. And I know a lot of you have now been playing with your client selection, Volume 1 cards. I myself have been having a great time with them, and as much as I've been enjoying playing Grand Blue recently, I kind of learned that I enjoy the revival mechanic in Vanguard quite a lot. But of course, as all of you know, Resurrection must come at a price. First of all, starting with our grade 3s, we are looking at 3 copies of Aidroid Malkuth-Melekh. His skill reads, when placed on Vanguard Counterblast 2, if your opponent is on grade 2, they take 1 damage, of course they perform a damage check, and if they're on grade 3, you recover 1 damage. Now, the only change I would make to this deck is I would bring this unit up to 4 copies, however I am waiting for my last copy to arrive, so until then this will have to do. However, its second skill is kind of where the bread and butter of the deck comes in. It's once on Vanguard circle once per turn, Soul Blast 1, call up to 3 cards from your drop zone to rearguard, and 3 of your front row units get 5k, and until the end of turn, and then you deal 1 damage to this unit, so you perform a damage check. So think of it as a sort of rescue check, except you don't recover 1, you just straight up take 1 damage. And the second unit that we're going to tag along with it, that's where kind of this enables some combo potential, is 3 copies of Sephiroth Ada Shin Malkuth-Melekh. Of course, in the normal deck list, it'd look a little more something like this. But unfortunately, since I'm waiting for my last copy of Malkuth to arrive, I have to compensate by running a 4th copy of Shin, whose skill reads, when revealed for a damage check, if your Vanguard is Aidroid Malkuth-Melekh, discard a card from your hand and write it as stand. Now, during your turn, if you have 2 more Protect markers, all of your front row gets 10k, and all of units on rearguard with Protect markers cannot be retired by your opponent by any player's effects. So, this isn't quite as good as Resist, so they can be dominated, they can be locked, they can be moved to Soul, but unfortunately, luckily, they can't be retired, but unfortunately, that's kind of where the restrictions are limited to. So, the interesting about this deck is it's very much so like a control-centric deck, so it's very combo-heavy, and it's one of the only decks that I know of that use Protect 2. So because you're able to potentially ride 2 per turn, between the 2 of their effects, your entire front row is potentially getting a bonus of up to 15k every single turn, while you're getting these Protect 2 markers, so your units are really beefing up. You get really, really fat intercepts, which means you can afford to play a bit more of a, like I was saying, like more of a control game. And the interesting thing with Shin as well is one of the quirks for the deck is, say you're not able to ride Shin during your turn. Well, okay, say you're now Aidroid Malkuth-Melekh and you're on 5 damage. When your opponent would attack you, if your first damage check is Shin, since it is revealed during a damage check, it doesn't say during your turn, you're able to discard 1 card, ride it, and effectively cancel the rest of the damage, since your new Vanguard wasn't the one that was hit. Sort of in the same way that, for those of you who play Zero, if your Vanguard has a critical, when you rewrite on top of it, that unit does not maintain the critical. The damage kind of functions the same way in Vanguard. So if you do rewrite over it, any damage that was dealt to Aidroid is negated, in effect. Now, in terms of grade 2s, our main grade 2 is going to be Amputation Angel, whose effect reads continues from rearguard. If you have Protect markers in the same column as this unit, it gets 15k, so this is active during both players' turns. And then, on rearguard, and during your battle attacked, if you have 3 or more Protect markers, your opponent cannot call Sentinels. So effectively, on its own, you're looking at it swinging for, anywhere between 24 and 29, no Sentinel restrictions, plus another 15k if you're on Malkuth, if you manage to get the combo off this turn. And keep in mind, the nice thing about this deck is there's almost no bad rides, because there's so much Soul Blasting and calling from drop zone, you are effectively able to reuse these effects over and over and over and over again on a turn-to-turn basis, which means you can be very liberal with your intercepts, you can give your Protect 2 markers more or less anywhere, and you just want to give these really, really fat shields that your opponent isn't able to break through, since you are able, with Malkuth's skill, to effectively heal every turn, and with cards we go into later, realize you are able to heal anywhere between 1 and 2 damage a turn without any triggers, which is pretty fantastic. Like I was saying, this is kind of going to be your main ride target, since effectively you'd hope to go to a grade 1 we're going to talk about later, and this grade 2, and then call them out with Malkuth's skill. But obviously we'll be getting onto that later, and also stick around, since we will be making a combo video coming over the next week, since there is quite a lot to this deck, as it's, in my opinion, one of the more, if not the most technical deck currently in the Premium. Moving on, we've got 4 copies of Holy Lord Angel. Now this card is available in Clan Selection Volume 1 alongside Shin Malkuth-Melekh and several other cards, such as the PG. And speaking of, if you are looking to pick up any sort of splits for Clan Selection Volume 2, or perhaps any sealed product for Volume 1, Overdress or anything beyond, please do consider checking out our sponsor Golden Phoenix Games, link to which will be in the description, and don't forget to use code ECHO at checkout to be able to get $5 off of your splits. Now, of course, the thing with Holy Lord Angel is when placed Vanguard or Rearguard, look at top 7 from the top of your deck, reveal a card with Malkuth-Melekh in its card name, add it to your hand, and then pick a normal unit, so a non-trigger from your hand, a non-trigger and non-order, and put it at the top of the deck. So, obviously you have to reveal this to your opponent, so there's a bit of mind games involved with what you actually reveal. But the interesting the thing to note is that the card you put on top doesn't actually have to be the card, the Malkuth that you drew. So more often than not, what will happen is you'll be on original Malkuth, then you'll do something like this, you'll draw Shin Malkuth, you'll put it at the top, or you already have Shin Malkuth in hand, so you effectively just search for a card. Even if you whiff, you activate as much of the skill as possible, so you still put something at the top of the deck, and then from there, you're effectively fine, and then you're able to trigger Malkuth's skill, Soul Blast 1, call the things from your deck, and when you damage check, you will be able to ride the Shin Malkuth. So things like the small little quirks that make the deck really interesting, but the thing to note is that this is a named once per turn. So even if you're able to recall it multiple times, you will not be able to trigger its effect on multiple instances. If you want another card that appears in Clan Selection is Aidroid Zion, whose skill reads, during your turn, if a new card was put into your opponent's damage zone, this gets 10k. And then on Rearguard, when it attacks a Vanguard, choose one of your opponent's Rearguards, move it to damage zone, and then they heal a card from their damage zone. So you're effectively able to have some spot removal. So, you know, something like a pesky back row unit. Perhaps if you're playing against Hachikaze and that new grade 1 is causing you trouble, well, you can easily just yeet it in the damage zone, and if they have no damage, they discard it back to the drop zone, or effectively they're able to, they choose what to heal, but you're able to just choose a card and just move it away to the damage zone. This card is mostly here for just that pesky removal, but generally speaking, it doesn't do an awful lot otherwise for the deck. It's kind of like the one spot where I think in the future, if we get some more, perhaps soul charging in Angel Feather, this will be where it goes. But I think it's going to take a little more practice. I haven't personally found something, but if you guys have any recommendations for cards to replace it with, do put it in the description below, or in the comment section, rather. And finally, in terms of our grade 2s, we are running 3 copies of Black Oculus? I don't know. Yafkiel, whose skill reads, Vanguard or Rearguard. When plays Counterblast 1, it gets 3k, and then return a card from your damage zone to your hand, and if you return the card, deal 1 damage to your Vanguard. Again, this is a named once per turn. Now, what you effectively do with that is this is another way to trigger that self-damage check on yourself. So say, for example, you don't have the Soul Blast from Malkuth-Melekh, so you can't actually call things from the drop zone. You can call this from hand, counterblast a card you want to add to your hand, add it. This is another way of us healing, because of course, when you check Shin Malkuth on top of Malkuth, you don't actually take that damage, because that card is ridden, so you effectively just get to heal 1 for free. Because of course, yes, it's a counterblast, but more often than not, you'll end up counterblasting the card you want to add to hand. So it kind of ends up as a net positive, because you just get to heal a card, add it to hand, so your hand pluses, and it's a pretty hard plus. Your damage is effectively healed 1, and you know, you're also able to obtain another protect marker, your front row gets 10k, etc, etc, etc. Again, this is another very important part of the combo, but of course we'll release another video later this week explaining, because there's so many intricacies to the deck that I couldn't possibly explain it in such a short period of time. And of course, moving on to our grade 1s, we have 4 copies of Persistence Angel, once again coming to us from Clan Selection Volume 1. His skill reads, act on Rearguard once per turn, Soul Blast 1, draw a card, discard a card, and put a card with Malkuth-Melekh in its card name from your drop zone to the top of your deck. So the interesting thing is, because you Soul Blast first, say you just rewrote Malkuth, you can Soul Blast a Shin, draw a card, discard a card, and then put that Shin at the top of your deck. So that when your Malkuth triggers, once again, Malkuth or Yafkiel, you are then able to just check that damage and re-ride. But keep in mind, this doesn't say Shin Malkuth, so of course if you are on Shin, you could be looking to Soul Blast original Malkuth, stack that, and then your first drive check will be Malkuth, so you're guaranteed that re-ride next turn. Once again, since this is, unlike the other ones, isn't a named once per turn, so you are going to find this is a bit more spammable, but you want to be very, very careful since the deck doesn't have that much soul charge at all. It only really has 1 card that does that, so you want to be very, very conservative with the way you expand your soul. But of course, that'll be something we discuss a bit more in our combo video. But this is kind of your main setup play for the Shin Malkuth turn, because you're ideally going to draw it at some point during the game. Now, moving on from that, we have 4 copies, which is, in my opinion, really the deck's MVP, coming to us as a double rare from the Astral Force, looking at Sectio, Angel, whose skill reads Rearguard. If you have a Protect marker in the same column as this unit, it cannot be chosen by card effects, and it gets Intercept, and can intercept from the back row. So this, in combination with Amputation Angel, creates humongous columns, and since this can't be chosen by opponent's effects, they can't Zion it, so they can't put it into the soul. They can intercept from the back row with a single Protect marker. This is looking to be a 20k intercept, and of course you are able to call it back every single turn with Malkuth's skill, if you are able to rewrite it, but ideally you should be rewriting Malkuth and Shin Malkuth every single turn, since effectively the soul cost recycles itself. So say you write a Malkuth, you have a Malkuth and Shin Malkuth in soul, you'll Soul Blast the Shin for the grade 1's effect, you'll Soul Blast the Malkuth for the second effect, you stack the Shin at the top, and then you're able to check it again, and then that kind of cycle repeats itself every single turn. So you have 2 of the Angels, yes, you -1 in soul, but you are guaranteed those 2 the next turn. So it's kind of a risk assessment game where you have to assess your situation in the game and kind of act accordingly from that point forward. But this card really is the MVP for the deck from the time I've spent playing it. And finally, this is where there is a bit of a disagreement kind of in terms of deck building. So a lot of people are running the Grade 3 Searcher and Nakir that came out in VBT12. But personally, I much prefer this rare from the Astral Force called Oscultate Angel. So speaking of singles, don't forget to check out our linked TCG player if you are looking to pick up any singles in the US. And it effectively just helps support the channel, and you guys are able to pick up cheap singles. So Oscultate's Angel skill is when placed from hand. Keep in mind this came out when Shin Malkuth hasn't yet existed. So you may look at top 7 cards, search the original Malkuth-Melekh, add it to hand, and if you did, this goes to soul. So this is the card I was talking about earlier that is a very essential piece for the deck in terms of creating that soul, since it effectively just acts as some fodder for us to yeet into the abyss, and effectively never looked at again. But it is something that adds a Malkuth to our hand, which is super important. It doesn't force us to discard, which is also huge, because if you think about it, our Grade 2 is the only card that's the Grade 1 is the only one that actually stacks our deck from drop zone, and that allows us to discard anyway. So I really don't see a reason in discarding any more than you absolutely have to, and Malkuth is a much better first ride than Shin Malkuth. If you have to be stuck on one, you'd much rather be stuck on Malkuth. Now, finally, our trigger lineup. We are running, so as I was saying earlier, we're looking to make this a bit more of a control deck, kind of like the thinking man's deck, as it were. So of course we're going to run 4 draw PGs, since the deck, as I was saying earlier, is quite controlling, so you can actually get away with discarding the odd card. Sometimes you need to just put the Malkuth in the drop zone for whatever reason, because you're maybe not able to discard enough and you want to stack the deck some more. So you're going to run the 4 PGs, or 4 draw PGs. Then we're going to run 4 heal triggers, of course. If you're going to play a control game, you're going to have a hard time doing that if you die on turn 3. But, of course, just because we need that survivability to play that grind game, that leaves us a bit more starved for the larger shield values, which unfortunately does mean that we have to find ourselves playing 8 copies of the critical trigger. Now guys, I want to say thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you guys had a great time. I hope you guys learned something. As I said earlier, we are going to have a combo video coming out later this week. I hope you guys try this out. I have had an absolute blast playing this deck. This has actually become my favorite deck coming out of clan selection. If you guys enjoy this, do like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below letting us know how to improve. Share it with your friends. And of course, guys, thank you very much for sticking with us in our 2-month absence. Take care, stay safe, show other people some love, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.